After I did my first media interview, I had to call my parents and let them know A, that I'd been sexually assaulted when I was 13, and B, that it was going to be front page of the newspaper the next day. In February 2021, I posted on Instagram, have you or has anyone close to you ever been sexually assaulted by someone who went to an all-boys school in Sydney?
Chanel Contos attracted thousands of testimonies.
Well, she was inundated. A massive response.
A few days after, I was like, guys, I think I broke Sydney. And so I launched teachersconsent.com with a petition for mandated and age-appropriate consent education. My life completely changed overnight. This whole thing happened from my little tiny room in London during COVID. I would open Instagram and every single person I knew's Instagram story was asking people to sign the petition. What is going on? Like, this is everywhere. Almost 7,000 people submitted testimonies, 50,000 people signed the petition. The volume of testimonies that I read, I don't think any human is supposed to consume that amount of content depicting, like, explaining those sorts of situations. I didn't cope with that, bottom line.
Do you want to try my milkshake?
So I remember being on the phone to the former Minister of Education, Alan Tudge, and him being like, we've got consent races coming, they're coming. It's this milkshake video, which for so many reasons is so problematic.
What are you doing?
Drink it all.
It could not have been more perfect because it just showed how terrible the consent education that young people were receiving. Experts weren't being consulted, youth weren't being consulted. That was horrible. They were using some weird analogy that shoving a milkshake in someone's face is the same thing as sexual assault.
And that's not good.
Young people deserve explicit consent education. I'd like to teach you how to not sexually assault someone. We underestimate what young people can handle. That milkshake video was honestly insulting, and also the perpetrator in the video was a woman. That doesn't reflect the reality of the situation when 97% of perpetrators of sexual assault in Australia are men, and there's no point not acknowledging that.
An entire generation of kids will receive education now around consent because of you.
Gee, your parents must be proud.
A year later, I presented at a meeting with all of the ministers of education from around the country, and they unanimously agreed to mandate consent education in the Australian national curriculum from kindergarten until year 10 every year. The quote that opens my book says, "Be ruthless with systems and kind with people." I learned quite early on that that was the best way to enact change and to bring everyone into this conversation and also hold a shared level of accountability. Trying to say, how can we be really explicit talking about the culture we have? How can we challenge those ideas that are problematic? How can we critique them? But when it comes down to an individual basis, one-on-one, how can we be as kind as possible as we try to move out of the situation? Since posting that initial question on Instagram, nationally we've had mandated consent education. We've seen $77 million be invested in consent education implementation to make sure that policy is seen through. Hundreds of millions be injected into the sexual violence prevention. A really important national conversation, and just kind of normalise this topic at the dinner table, in front of the TV. I'm so happy with how everything turned out. I think Australia has such an opportunity right now. Every single person should be taking it upon themselves to reflect on how they've contributed to a rape culture. Language we may have used, jokes we may have said. I think it's really about being willing to sit in that discomfort, reflect, and commit to doing better going forward. Sexual violence occurs when entitlement to another person's body outweighs your empathy towards that person. We can have extremely low rates of sexual violence because I do believe the vast majority of sexual violence that is experienced in Australia is preventable. It's the culture that's enabled this. Success for me looks like a new generation of Australians that are inherently empathetic towards each other.